He didn't deserve to die like this in this accident. Horrifying.
People were leaving candles and memories by the site where Charles Lewis Jr., also known as the Mask, died in a speed-related accident.
He then observed two vehicles to his left coming in the southbound lanes. They appeared to be out of control. He could not tell the speeds, but he then witnessed a red Ferrari collide with the curb and then a pole.
Before sunrise on March 11, 2009, Newport Beach resident Katie McCaffrey woke up to two loud sports cars revving their engines just outside her apartment. She peered out her third-story window that overlooked Jamboree Road, a 6-lane road that cuts through the middle of the wealthy beach city. She saw what she described as, quote, white flash moving southbound.
And may his spirit live on, and may he go to heaven with the biggest wings.
It's very common to see the world's fastest and most expensive sports cars on Jamboree, so McCaffrey didn't think much of it at first. This white flash would end up being a 1977 Porsche 911 driven by one Jeffrey David Kirby. Kirby, whose blood alcohol level is estimated to have been 0.16 at the time, was passed by a couple in a Ferrari 360 Challenge straight out. This barely road-legal Italian sports car is one of only 1,288 ever produced. They can go for upwards of $300,000. The person driving this car was wealthy, and he wanted people to know it. Kirby decided to show off a little bit and send a message by passing the Ferrari. Going over 100 miles per hour, Kirby's Porsche hit the curb, losing control and spinning in front of the Challenge straight out. The two cars collided, sending the Ferrari flying into the concrete pole, which ripped the aluminum frame supercar in half. Jeffrey David Kirby and his passenger were uninjured after the accident. In fact, they drove away without checking in on the car they just hit. Those in the Ferrari were not so lucky. Passenger Lacey White suffered many injuries, including a broken elbow, back, hip, and pelvis. She was rushed to the hospital. The driver, Lacey White's boyfriend at the time, was pronounced dead on impact. 45-year-old Charles Mask Lewis Jr., founder of Tapout and beloved figure in the mixed martial arts community, was tragically killed in a drunk driving accident. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's rewind for a second. Charles Mask Lewis Jr. was born and raised in San Bernardino, California. His father, Charles Lewis Sr., was a football coach at San Gorgonio High School, the high school Mask would eventually attend. His mother was the vice principal at the same school. Mask's parents were role models, not only to him, but the community around him. He saw his parents uplift underprivileged students simply for the sake of helping. These values were taught to Mask from day one. He learned to put others before himself. His parents divorced when he was young, but Mask maintained relationships with them both. Preceding his days as a football coach, Mask's father was a Marine. Lewis Sr. had an intimate relationship with discipline, one that rubbed off on Mask. His father's disciplinary nature inspired him to train in various martial arts. Mask fell in love with Taekwondo and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, constantly training and quickly rising in the ranks. He found comfort in the structure of Jiu-Jitsu. It was something he could feel good about pouring his time into. It became an outlet for Mask, a craft to which he could dedicate himself, not unlike his father's dedication to the Marine Corps. In the 2015 documentary, Mask, Lewis Jr. said, quote, "I'm just a guy who's trying to be what my dad was." With some help from his father, Mask got a position as a deputy sheriff at the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. He was assigned to the Central Detention Center. He was a county jail guard, a role that requires the ability to physically restrain inmates. Mask's martial arts training was finally paying off. His co-workers took interest in his love for mixed martial arts and wanted to share this passion. Mask set up mats in the basement of the detention center. He and his co-workers would train before work, after work, and even during breaks. He was immersed in the mixed martial arts community and wanted to contribute more than just training. While working at the Sheriff's Department, Mask had an idea for a brand called Tapout, something that would eventually elevate his career and the mixed martial arts community as a whole.
Can Tapout be as big as Nike? I mean, why can't it surpass that? The only dream to that level, or not even to be able to dream to the level that has already been created, is not dreaming at all. I'm dreaming way past that.
Tapout started as a hobby and creative outlet for Mask. He got together a few designs to put on t-shirts and stickers. People love the brand's logo, which remains the company's primary branding to this day. Mask and his training buddies wore these shirts everywhere. Didn't we all? I'm not gonna lie, I was one of them too. I had about 400 Tapout shirts, and all the homies did. People on the streets would ask where they could buy the shirts. He could tell that people actually liked his merchandise and believed in his vision. He certainly believed in his own vision. Mask became somewhat of a brand ambassador quickly. He sewed Tapout patches on the back of his gi to represent the brand during training sessions and fights. He set up merchandise tables at local gyms and mixed martial arts events. Mask was very vocal about Tapout's inevitable success. From its earliest stages, he was confident that the brand would exceed expectations. Some of his colleagues were not so confident in his vision, so he decided to prove them wrong. With the help of his two buddies, Daniel Punk-Ass Caldwell and Tim Skyscrape Katz, Mask would dedicate himself to growing Tapout. He took a leave of absence from the Deputy Sheriff's Department to pursue the brand full-time. In the late 90s, mixed martial arts as you know it was still a work in progress. States were trying to ban the sport entirely. Politicians like John McCain were publicly denouncing MMA, likening it to, quote, human cockfight. No, not that kind of cock, this kind of cock. The UFC wasn't established enough to be taken seriously by major corporations. Organized fights lacked brand representation and sponsorship, as did the fighters that participated. This is where Mask saw an opportunity for Tapout. It was one of the earliest grassroots brands in the sport. He was already in on the ground floor. Mask could see the trajectory that mixed martial arts was on, and he wanted to solidify Tapout as a cornerstone in the MMA world. The brand could be to the UFC what Adidas was to the NBA at the time. Despite pushback from the general public and corporate world alike, underground mixed martial arts events lived on, and the fan base was passionate. Mask, Punk-Ass, and Skyscrape were attending every one of these events that they could, selling Tapout merchandise, networking, and sharing the vision behind their company. What started as a few t-shirts and stickers was quickly becoming something much more. Tapout was reaching beyond just the core Southern California MMA community. Mask was at an exciting point in his life. He bet on himself, quit his job, and founded a promising young brand in a promising young sport.
Mask said he wanted to start this clothing company and start selling t-shirts.
There's a lot of things that shaped coming up with Tapout. It started off with me and Punk-Ass having a competition of who could come up with the newest, the coolest license plate, you know, and you gotta be creative and punch that out in 7 letters.
Sadly, Mask's parents didn't live to see their son's success. In 1999, Mask's mother passed away from unknown causes. 2 years later, his father passed away as well. Of course, Mask was devastated. Just when everything was looking up, he lost the 2 people that shaped him into the man he became. However, Mask's family dynamic was far from perfect. His parents filed for divorce when he was young. They both worked constantly, lacking proper time to spend with their son. Being the disciplinarians they were, Mask was no stranger to receiving corporal punishment as a kid. He suffered through physical abuse whenever he got in trouble or wasn't applying himself. While he admired his parents' discipline regarding their successful careers, he resented the way they handled punishment. Unfortunately, this wasn't the extent of Mask's childhood trauma. Around the age of 8, he suffered through repeated abuse from his friend and next-door neighbor. At home, Mask didn't feel safe around his parents. When they were at work, Mask would spend time at his neighbor's house, where he also felt unsafe. He was angry, confused, and deeply scarred, mentally and physically. Mask bottled up his emotions because he didn't know who he could confide in. These issues seemed unapproachable at such a young age. He was forced to put up a tough exterior, one that concealed his internal pain. When Tapout began gaining momentum, this exterior materialized as his namesake, Mask. He began wearing his signature warrior face paint, which gave him an intimidating look. He constantly wore a camouflage bucket hat as a nod to his father's military career. This was Mask's new identity. He built himself a shell in which he could comfortably navigate the world. When he was Mask, he could direct all of his energy into Tapout, even if that energy spurred from negative life experiences. He poured his heart and soul into the brand. Former UFC heavyweight champion Josh Barnett called Mask's behavior, quote, an overcompensation for whatever was troubling him. His loud, large, theatrical presence was a distraction not only to others, but himself. Mixed martial arts gave Mask's life meaning, and his public persona cemented his position in the community. Mask suffered so much in the past that he just wanted to help those around him. This was his vision for Tapout. He wanted to sponsor fighters and provide them with the proper financial compensation they deserved. If Tapout could become a mainstay in mixed martial arts, Mask could help elevate the sport that he loves so dearly. And you can help elevate this channel by leaving a like. Come on, we're back at it, baby. If you're enjoying this awesome documentary about the great legend Mask, please consider leaving a like. It really means a lot to the channel. And of course, subscribe if you're new here and turn on those post notifications. We got a lot of crazy stories coming up. Thanks for supporting. Now let's get back into it. This vision came true for the most part. Tapout exploded in popularity alongside mixed martial arts in the early 2000s. They signed fighters such as UFC light heavyweight champion Rashad Evans and infamous trash talker Chael Sonnen, not to mention partnerships with guys like Chuck Liddell. Mask himself became a notable figure in the community, his presence synonymous with the Tapout brand. His primary goal was influence, grow Tapout to its full potential. Make no mistake, the company was definitely growing to its full potential, quickly. Tapout was annually raking in $1 million in revenue by the early 2000s, just a few short years after its inception. Mask saw the brand's success as a win for mixed martial arts as a whole. Around the mid-2000s, UFC pay-per-view fights were pulling hundreds of thousands of viewers. The success of fighters like the Iceman and Matt Hughes drew broad, mainstream appeal to the sport. UFC video games were popping up, with Mask appearing as a playable character in some. I'm not gonna front, I didn't use Mask when he was, I think he was in Tapout 2 for Xbox, if I'm not mistaken. And I was like, oh, Tapout guy, yeah, I'll use him a little bit back then. I was like, nah, I'm not gonna use him, I'm gonna use Chuck Liddell. The sport of mixed martial arts, the UFC and Tapout were becoming cash cows. Serious money was flowing to the hands of networks like Spike and UFC majority owners Frank and Lorenzo Fertitta. However, Tapout was no slouch when it came to sales either. They were on pace with their colleagues as the sport grew. By 2019, they were on track to do $225 million in sales. Damn! Money never made a man happy yet, nor will it. The more a man has, the more he wants. Instead of filling a vacuum, it makes one. Benjamin Franklin. While it's clear that Mask loved mixed martial arts, the people within the community, and the brand of Tapout, it's hard to deny that he also loved the money that came along with it. Coinciding with the brand's newfound success, the Tapout crew started spending significant money on opulent houses, sports cars, and accessories. Mask and the Tapout crew had immeasurable wealth all of a sudden. Instead of allocating most of their checks to investments and savings, they bought any and everything they could think of. This income should be generational wealth for them and their families, but they didn't grow up with this outlook. We see what happens to newly drafted NBA players. Kids who grew up with nothing don't know how to act when they earn an overnight fortune. However, Mask was entering his 40s at this point, and Tapout had been almost a decade in the works. Still, Mask didn't continue to live at or below his means. He elevated his lifestyle proportionate to how much money he was making. This wealth wasn't filling a vacuum, it was making one, and the only thing that would fill it were cars and mansions. Upon receiving their first $1 million paychecks, Mask and his best friend and business partner, Dan Punk-Ass Caldwell, immediately went out to buy supercars. Punk-Ass bought a 2006 Lamborghini Gallardo equipped with a custom carbon fiber exhaust system. At over 520 horsepower, this thing could fly past 200 miles per hour. Punk-Ass also purchased a Hummer H1 with a big Tapout logo plastered on the side. This truck stuck out like a sore thumb. It was commonly spotted by fans of his. He also purchased a blacked out Mercedes-Benz S63 AMG. I'm not gonna lie, that's a dope car. Punk-Ass, the co-founder of Tapout, built himself an impressive fleet of enthusiast cars, but Mask Garage took the cake. The day he and Punk-Ass went supercar shopping, Mask decided on a 2004 Ferrari 360 Challenge Straight Ale. It's hard to emphasize how ridiculous this car is. It's a Formula One style race car that Ferrari modifies in-house to make it street legal. It weighs less than a Toyota Corolla, but has the horsepower of a semi-truck. Most importantly, it's a bright red Ferrari, and everyone will stare at it. Mask wanted to show the world his success, and rightfully so. To be clear, this wasn't the extent of Mask's collection. He also purchased a fully custom 2005 Porsche Turbo S, as well as a fully custom 2005 Bentley Continental GT. The HRE wheels alone cost him over $10,000. The man clearly enjoyed his cars, and he certainly had the money to spend on them. Okay, I think that's enough backstory. Let's fast forward to March 11th, 2009. Charles Mask Lewis Jr., after his Ferrari was identified and confirmed by Punk-Ass, was pronounced dead on Jamboree Road in Newport Beach, California. This is a bit graphic, but Mask's remains were unable to be identified due to the impact and severity of the crash. The driver's side of the car made contact with a pole, leaving Mask no chance of survival. His girlfriend at the time, Lacey White, flew from under her seatbelt out of her seat, landing near a bush on the side of the road. As she came to and realized what happened, Lacey looked up to see a white Porsche 911 continue driving southbound down Jamboree Road. Neither Kirby nor his partner checked in on Lacey or Mask or even got out of the car. The couple just continued driving. An incredibly intoxicated Jeffrey David Kirby had just taken the life of Mask and endangered the life of his girlfriend. He received 9 years in prison on account of vehicular manslaughter with gross negligence. This wasn't his first DUI either. Kirby was convicted of driving under the influence in 1985 as well as 2002. The mixed martial arts community was torn to pieces. Millions of fans and fighters mourned the loss of Mask. People remembered him for his contagious energy, positive presence, and huge smile. He truly achieved his goal of uplifting those around him. Although it was short, Mask's career gave opportunities to so many people. He founded a business that did 9 figures in annual revenue. He helped grow and legitimize mixed martial arts, the sport he dedicated his life to. The last thing on anyone's mind was Mask's Ferrari. Sure, it's a bummer that such an expensive car was literally disintegrated, but people were obviously more concerned with the life lost. The liquid worth of that Ferrari was a drop in the bucket of Mask's estate.
He's one of the realest people I've ever met.
He had plenty of money that would go to his 2 kids, Boaz and Cayenne, and their mother, Diane Larson, or so people assumed. Unfortunately, Mask died without a written will and/or testament, meaning it was unclear whose hands his estate would fall into. Enter John S. Williams, Orange County Public Administrator. In May of 2009, Williams was granted Mask's entire estate over Diane Larson, the mother of his children. He sold Mask's remaining cars, the Bentley Continental GT and a recently purchased Mercedes-Benz, for pennies on the dollar, potentially leaving hundreds of thousands on the table. Williams also gave $45,000 to the Tapout crew as money to cover Mask's funeral costs. While this may seem like a kind gesture from Williams, the money was given after Punk Gas and Skyscrape explicitly told the public administrator that they would cover the funeral costs. They too, after all, were the beneficiaries of Tapout's success and wanted to honor their friend's life on their own dime. They saw this $45,000 as a pity handout from a man who stole their best friend's fortune. Diane Larson was rightfully upset too, as her and her children were left without the fruits of Mask's labor. Everyone knew that Mask would want his money in the hands of his family. He dedicated his entire life to helping loved ones and community members. For Mask's estate to land in the hands of a greedy, unfit public administrator was heartbreaking. This wasn't the first time Williams was condemned for mismanaging large estates, nor was it the last. He's been accused of coercing people to sign away their personal assets, which he ostensibly uses to help the Orange County office's debt problem. While it's not confirmed that Mask's wealth was exploited in this ploy, it's certainly not out of the question. In 2010, almost a year after Williams assumed ownership of Mask's estate, the remainder was given to Diane Larson and her 2 children. It's a shame that Williams wasted tens of thousands of dollars before handing over the money to its rightful heirs, but thankfully, that's where it ended up. Mask was a selfless person, if a bit troubled. His past trauma fueled his altruism. If Josh Barnett is correct in his assumption that Mask's behavior was, quote, an overcompensation for whatever was troubling him, then his death, while out of his hands, was the ultimate self-sacrifice. If I can do things to help change others' lives and help put them in a position of betterment, and I can do that enough times, doesn't that mean that I live for something?